next, I'm very happy to meet for the first time today and to be able to introduce Frances Townsend, who was our country's third Homeland Security Advisor and a former assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. She comes to us, of course, with an in-depth background and feet-on-the-ground experience with all security issues. So we really look forward to hearing what she has to say today. Thank you for being here, Frances.
Thank you, Antonia, and it is really a privilege to be with so many friends, both here in the room and those, I'm glad you mentioned, around the world, particularly in Iran and in Camp Liberty, who, though they can't be with us, they are here in spirit and we hold them close in our hearts. Antonia mentioned Camp Liberty. I don't have to say to anybody here in this room or listening, it is an internment camp. It is an atrocity. It is a shameful thing that the United States has permitted it to continue in the way it has, and not insisted that our, quote, ally, end quote, in Iraq not rectify the horrific conditions and the insecurity that they are forced to endure every single day. And so, you know, as we celebrate, and in many respects in this country, thinking to the women, especially in Camp Liberty, you can't help but take a moment to be incredibly grateful. I enjoy, and the women in this room enjoy the freedom of speech and the freedom to assemble here, the freedom to express ourselves, both those things that we have every right, like you've heard Patty talk about and Loretta Sanchez, to be extremely proud of in this country, and the right to talk about the things that I want to see changed. And those things that I want to see changed may be different than what Antonia wants to see changed. They may be the same, but they may be different, and that's okay. And I am incredibly grateful and feel incredibly blessed and privileged to live in a country where we can have that debate. But unfortunately, the women in Iran, the women in Camp Liberty, and in many oppressed nations around the world don't share those blessings. And so as we come together to celebrate, in many respects, International Women's Day, I feel it incumbent to say that we do so with humility, we do so with pride, but we do so with the steadfast commitment that until all women around the world who live under oppression in places like Iran and Iraq, in Yemen and Afghanistan, until all women enjoy those freedoms, then we must have, our celebration is tempered, that we must have a commitment to continue the fight until all women share that kind of equality. You know, to the women in Liberty, to the women in Iran in particular, because of who we are and why we are gathered here today, I say to them that your sisters do not forget you, and your sisters stand with you. We remember our responsibility to you to be your voice, to be your inspiration as you are ours. We pray for your safety and ultimately for your equality, and we look forward to an International Women's Day when you can stand here with us and celebrate as we celebrate the freedoms that we enjoy. We've heard this morning talk about how women influence at home. I am the mother of 2 sons, and so women have extraordinary influence over the way men think, the way men go out into the world, how they present themselves, and how they interact with women. But women also have the luxury in this country. Hillary Clinton is a great example. Loretta Sanchez is another. Condi Rice and Madeleine Albright. Women here in this country go into the public square and have the ability to influence public policy and public debate. Mrs. Rajavi leads the Iranian resistance in exile, and she too stands steadfast with the women in Liberty and Iran and around the world, despite threats to her physical safety. Inspired by these women who, at great personal risk, take on a public role. After I left government a year ago, I decided to challenge the Islamic extremists in the public square, and started, along with men, Joe Lieberman, former senator, and Ambassador Mark Wallace, a project called the Counter-Extremism Project. And it directly challenges the extremists on the internet, like Twitter. And the people in this room with your experience will not be the least bit surprised that the immediate reaction to the extremists was to make death threats against me and threats against the organization. And I must tell you, I thought, yes, you have to take that seriously. I think those of you who know me and know women in this country, the last thing a woman in the United States is going to do is be bullied or intimidated by a thug. And so we, of course, doubled down and increased our engagement on Twitter and the internet. You've seen... And by the way, right, the reason they threaten you is because you're being effective. And so you have to understand, if you weren't making a difference, they wouldn't threaten you. They'd ignore you. And so obviously we were making a difference. And we pushed very hard, and we've had some success. Twitter, who's tried to ignore us as well, has been forced, as you saw this week in the press, to begin closing these accounts and denying. Look, there is no one who is a greater advocate for the First Amendment. But any lawyer, I am one, will tell you that the First Amendment has limits. No one has the right to post a beheading video on the internet. No one has the right to post beheading photographs on the internet. That's a means of recruitment and intimidation and bullying that we won't stand for. And so, look, while you take the threat seriously, I'm a lot safer here in the United States challenging these guys than Mrs. Rajavi is, even in Paris, than the women in Liberty or Iran are under those regimes. And so even a small step in the public square, every woman in this room has a voice. Every woman in this room can alleviate the plight of the women in Liberty and Iran. And to the women in Liberty and Iran, it's not just in this room, but there are women around the United States and around the world who are doing just that and will continue to do that. Washington at the moment is rightly focused on denying Iran a nuclear program. I will tell you that Mrs. Rajavi has made it a non-nuclear Iran a pillar, a foundation stone of the Iranian resistance for which she is to be commended. But unfortunately, we've allowed the negotiations that are currently underway to be singly focused on that very important issue, while Iran continues to have an abysmal human rights record, while executions are on the rise against dissidents in Iran, while they continue to be the world's single largest state sponsor of terrorism. None of that's on the table yet, and that's unfortunate. And so while, look, we all hope that there is a successful resolution to deny Iran a nuclear weapons program, these negotiations better just be the beginning, because there is an awful lot to be resolved in terms of their denying state sponsorship of terrorism, providing human rights to all Iranians, providing equality, providing the right of freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, and freedom of expression to all Iranians. And again, the voice of the Iranian resistance and Mrs. Rajavi advocates all those things. You know, I was struck by the video. I don't think you could sit there and watch that and not have it take your breath away. Sort of the devastating effects of these acid attacks. It reminded me, when you see at the very end of the video, you can destroy my face but not my belief. It was Malala who said you can kill a person but not an idea. And if that's the only thing we remember about our meeting here today, we should remember that. We must not be discouraged by those things we have not yet achieved. We must be inspired to renew our commitment to fight for those freedoms and that equality. I continue to be inspired by the relentless courage and fortitude of the women in Liberty and in Ashraf before them. I can remember my first meeting with the Iranian resistance community here in the United States, and immediately afterwards, women in Ashraf had sent a tape to me thanking me for my remarks. I was incredibly humbled by that and thought, given the conditions that they were living under, their thoughtfulness to send me a message. Regrettably, shortly after I received the tape, one of the women in the tape had been killed in an attack on Ashraf. I will never forget her. I will never forget the impact of her words to me, and I will never not speak up until the day when all women do not have to live in fear like she lived in Ashraf, and until all Iranian women can speak freely. These women inspire us to speak on their behalf. They inspire us to fight for their voices to be heard. They inspire us to fight on their behalf until someday soon they can be here with us to enjoy freedom and equality both here and at home. Thank you.